Hello and welcome back to Talon 101. This time we're going to take a quick look at RFS DF+4 or Snap Kick, the trusty old axe kick you use in pretty much any RFS situation, most especially if your opponent isn't pressing and they're not going to press because of RFS F4 most of the time. So why not just transfer to an axe kick that gives you +1 on block, +8 on hit, and most especially a counter hit launcher. Now, quick thing you need to know about RFS DF+4 Snap Kick is that it was never always like this. In previous Tekken games, this was a natural hitting launcher at -5 to -7 on block. Still goes back to left foot forward for the most part, but it did launch. Now it no longer does. It copies its brother, LFS DF3. Of course, DF3, as you know today in Tekken 7 or Tekken 8, is Double Claymore, which is his master's move. But he used to have a mirrored version of RFS DF+4 in Left Flamingo Stance, and that went into right foot forward right afterwards with the exact frames you know today. So you could say that he's honoring his past, or his lone brother, or his missing brother, right, from Flamingo Stance in a certain way, just the same way he honors his master's moves, just making it a little bit more ass. But he doesn't make his own moves ass. So it's still a 17 to 19 frame move, 2 extra active frames, +8 force crouch, +1 on block, a counter hit launcher, and goes back to left foot forward. Not right foot forward like the Left Flamingo version, but that's still pretty damn good. So it has everything from Left Flamingo Stance and Right Flamingo Stance combined. No more -5 on block, you're plus regardless on hit or on block, and you still get the launch if it's a counter hit, which is perfect for stuff like down 3-4 into RFS DF+4 if the opponent mashes there, if the opponent is delayed right after down back 4 on hit, or any other RFS situation for the most part. Now, the one con about Snap Kick, before we go to the options on hit or on block, is that it can be backdashed. Now, if your name is Elisa, or Handa or Kuma, you can backdash this on hit after down 3-4. One of the most advantageous situations in the whole of Tekken. You can backdash this on hit, which means now Hwoarang in those matchups is forced to default to Flying Eagle to prevent the backdash. And of course, that still can't be sidestep either way, can't power crush at those frames, so it's fine. But you need the just frame input to get the +1. Here, you don't need the just frame input in order to get the +1. But again, it can be backdashed on hit for those specific characters. But on block, if you do any of the RFF situations like RFF 2-4, that can be backdashed. Most especially if I manipulate the spacing here. Like so. RFF DF+4, like so. RFF 4, like so. You'll get it even on down back 4, on hit. Now, of course, you won't get down 2-4. So there are situations where, backdashing as a default option is pretty damn good for the opponent. And that takes away one of Hwoarang's best mid options, because the next mid option to cover those situations would put him at -2 rather than +1. It doesn't track anywhere at all. So if you do it after, let's say, 2-4, of course, that's Hwoarang, him and his below average sidestep. But if we tell him to start walking, yeah. So fine, catches sidestep left, but still basically losing everywhere else. And that's +3. So let's just change it to +4 to give him some frames to work with. And perhaps that's the spacing, because he is a little bit farther from the opponent as he does RFS DF+4, which tell him to go to the other side. So perhaps the farther the better for Hwoarang, because if they are closer, well, sometimes it would lose. So I wouldn't really bank on this tracking as much. You may as well stay with RFS F4, RFS down 3, and RFS forward 3 if you want to do any sort of tracking. The reason why you don't need to worry about it as much is because the opponent's already supposedly conditioned by RFS F4. So they're going to stay in place. So if they're already going to stay in place, and most especially if you're doing off situations where you have a lot of frame advantage to begin with, then you don't have to worry about, the axe kick or snap kick losing. So that basically covers the movement portion about snap kick. Now let's talk about the situations on hit and on block. So think of it as like a jab, except it does a little bit too much. Now, it being in left foot forward means you generally just check your opponent. So if you get this move on hit, you wanna do forward 2. This is the de facto option I want you to default to, because it basically prevents almost everything under the sun. So if we talk about a regular challenge, the opponent cannot do something like a down jab. They do a down jab, they go into RFS, RFF shenanigans. But generally speaking, they can't do that. They can't move. They can't sidestep. They can't backdash. It's just like, whoa, Frontier, they backdash there. You're right. Because where you hit RFS DF4 matters. The farther out, the more chances they have to step your forward 2. But if you did it up close, well, forget that sidestep. But again, generally speaking, there is no moving around forward 2. So you prevent as many universal and standard options as possible. For instances where your RFS DF4 hits from a far away distance, you want to change to DF4. It's the next best option you got. The only con about this homing move is that if done, right, you're gonna go -8 compared to -2 or even DF1 -1. Of course, all of these problems go away if you had heat because, right, long-reaching move into +5 heat dash. So, if it prevents a lot of universal options and there's only spacing you need to worry about, what's the next thing you need to worry about? Well, it's Rage Arts. Rage Arts, of course, at +8 can still be activated against a 16-frame move. So even if you prevented them from doing that, you need to make sure if they're about to have Rage, don't do forward 2 because they have the frames to do that, including your next failsafe in DF4. So what you want to do if Rage Art is going to be considered from your opponent, well, that's where your DF1 comes into play. Just make sure that your RFS DF4 doesn't hit too far from your opponent, because if it does hit too far from your opponent, the Rage Art's gonna activate, and that could see registered as a punish. You can't even hold back right after that, but you can hold back versus heat bursts. So forward 2 right after a heat burst, completely fine, completely safe. And DF4 unfortunately does not share that, so you're gonna get punished. And of course DF1 will prevent that, no problem. But of course again, it still shares that exact problem that if it was done too far, that heat burst is gonna hit you. Now, specific power crushes you would have to lab, but because they are going into force crouch, you can move around them really easily. But if they have an evasive move in full crouch, and Hwoarang has one or two, and in particular we want to use up back 2. This allows him to sidestep towards the left. It's actually still not a bad thing. Again, forward 2, right? Forward 2, DF4, and DF1 for as long as it's done up close. So you never really lose out for the most part. The only thing you really have to worry about again is armor. Armor and the spacing in which your RFS DF4 hit. Of course, you can always just play it safer and not use the +8 if you want to. Depends on how you want to gather the information. Do you want to gather the information through the button right away because you already know there's only 1 or 2 options the opponent's allowed to do? Or do you want to truly observe your opponent first and then work from there? So on hit, you're given that leeway to work around those type of things. On block, it's a little bit less like that. Because on block, again, it's a jab situation. So if you have the +1, right, you can follow up with jabs. So if you do want to do something, I recommend 1-2 forward 3 right after it. That way you remain safe with some space at -8, and they really need to use a big mid in order to prevent you from moving. But for the most part, just another jab or movement to either side. So just generally step towards the opponent's weak side. So if we turn on again a punish option for the opponent, here it's registered as power crush, and we step towards the left, then you get punish. Or you could even interrupt that immediately. No problem. So you're going to be using your brain a little bit more on block. And then on hit, it's truly your choice on what to do. Now, the last thing we need to talk about is the fact that it is indeed a counter hit launcher, right? So as you can see, I've been following up with back 3. So you can do an instant tornado. And an instant tornado is not a bad follow-up, but it actually has a lot more follow-ups that you're allowed to do. So number 1 is back 3. The second one is down back 4. You see this all the time. Most Hwoarangs would follow up with down back 4 after RFS DF4. You can follow up with forward 2, provided you have the timing down. So this does require a full or half second right afterwards. That way you don't mess up the timing and get pretty good damage in return. Now, if you don't have that timing, well, there are other fail safes that are available, like flashing trident and up forward 3+4, go straight into left flamingo stance. There's down 3-4, a weaker version of down back 4, but guaranteed to hit. If you don't want to do that, you can do something a little bit spicy, like 4-3, and then still get a combo. And now, it doesn't have to be 4-3. It could be 4-4. Now, this one's a little bit more tricky, so I highly recommend staying away from 4-4. But if you wanted to do this move, you totally could. Like so. And of course, if you didn't want to do the 4-3 or the 4-4, you actually are allowed to just do standing 4 by itself. A little bit comical that hits, but hey, anything to continue the combo. Now, the last thing is connected to forward 2 in a sense, wherein they have some execution requirements, but it's basically just requiring you to do a wall standing 4 right afterwards. This used to be one of the really good options you could do, most especially when Peacekeeper was still a follow-up. So if I were to kind of copy how it's done in Tekken 7, it would look something like this. Of course, here I would spend a resource needlessly with heat. So in that regard, you could just opt for forward 2 instead, because damage is in forward 2's wheelhouse compared to while standing 4. So that's 30 damage. And then while standing 4 is 28. It's only -2. But if you do have the execution, whether you do it from a crouch dash or you do an instant while standing, or whatever method your instant while standing will be, then yeah, it's pretty consistent for the most part. So yeah, that's almost everything about Snap Kick, because the last thing we need to talk about is the fact that it's a wall ender. Of course, you can use it in open space, but you'd sacrifice so much damage doing that. Might as well just do it over here, the standard way, and get your classic Okizeme. Video is linked in the description below. But yeah, it's reliable and can be used as Oki. So if you set up the combo properly, right, and you want to make sure you get access to right foot forward, that's going to be a hit into a counter hit launcher. So all we have to do is tell the opponent to do a punish option. So as they're getting hit or as they're waking up, what's going to happen is that they are going to get counter hit as soon as they press it. And, well, that's all Hwoarangs for the most part. And if that comes with a guaranteed back 3 afterwards, that'd be great. If it didn't, then yeah, don't do that kind of an ender. But yes, as Okizeme, now you can do it a little bit more in open space. Again, not as an ender, right? Because as an ender, you'd have to do something really, really poor. Like, say something like this. Yeah, that's a poor combo ender. That's why you don't do it in open. But you can do it in Oki. So just set up your combo as so, then swap to RFS, and then bam, right? Now, of course, I was a little bit too far there, so let's change the combo just a little bit. And then voila. So Snap Kick is basically good all across the board. It's basically the #1 draft pick. If you had a fantasy draft of selecting moves, this could easily go top 1, top 5, top 10. Because loss on hit, loss on block, counter hit launcher, follow-ups are good, both on hit or on block. It has some tracking. Now, of course, the con is that spacing can go against it, but then its spacing can be in its favor sometimes, most especially for opponents who are sidestepping, if you're using it with the moves that have that pushback already. And then it's still a combo ender. And really good for Okizeme situations. So it's really hard to complain about Snap Kick. Pretty damn good move. Always has been a good move. That's everything I know about it. So again, I've been Frontier, and thank you for watching.